Hey, how's it going? I'm so glad you're back, and I'm happy to be talking to you today about our next big lesson, which is kind of a big one and it's really fun. And we're going to be talking today about planning our next project, and whether you have recorded before or this is maybe your first big attempt at recording, whether it's a demo or an EP or a full-length album, and this is your first big project. We're going to talk all about planning and doing things in a systematic way so that things are really efficient and we don't miss anything important. And the biggest thing of all is so that we have a really smooth process and that there's no stress. Because, oh my goodness, as an artist, from personal experience, I know what it's like to feel like I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and I can't remember if I did this thing and that thing, and then there's these details that I missed, and now there's a deadline, and it can get really stressful. And let's face it, as artists, we are really sensitive to vibes. I know from experience that if I'm starting to feel really stressed out about my project, it almost kind of ruins it for me. And later down the road, I kind of look back and it's like, well, I really enjoyed my music that I did. It can kind of like taint it a little bit. Like, oh, it was such a stressful time in my life. We don't want our art and our music and our passion to equate to stress. And so I'm going to help you make this so much easier. And it's about having systems in place, having checklists and to-do lists and everything all organized and in one place. And that's why I've done this for you, is because I've been there and I've done that. And my personality just naturally organizes information. And so I've done this for you, and I hope that this will make your experience so much better and just a little more clear, and help you just make some of those decisions, because a lot of it is not just knowing what to do, but then doing the work and doing it in the right order. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. We've got a lot of really fun things to plan, and I really look forward to going through this with you and you sharing your experiences about it in the Facebook group. So don't forget to hop on there and really share with everybody what you're going through and your processes and your questions, and get feedback. That's really important to make the most out of this course. So we've also talked about previously all the things we can do to stand out, and really narrowing down our genre and our niche, and really knowing ourselves and our why and why we're doing this all in the first place. And this all is the foundation. It all ties in together to what we're about to do right now, the planning part of our next project. So when it comes down to choosing mixers and mastering and t-shirt designers and all of that, it all builds on that first foundation that we already laid. So if you are going through this course and you're kind of maybe watching them all at once, that's cool, but just know that that preliminary work that we've done in the beginning is really important. And I highly recommend that you go back, if you haven't already, and go through those lessons and do those worksheets that I've provided for you, because they're going to really help you in this next huge phase that we're going to be working on right now, which is planning the CD. So let's get to work, and let's start with some of the most important things that we need to do first in order to launch our next big project. Let's talk about budget first, because this is a big hurdle for many of us. And when we're just first starting out and we are trying to figure out what we're going to be doing, we kind of need to know what we're working with. Are we starting from ground zero, or do we have, bandmates that are going to contribute to our project? And if so, then that kind of changes things up a little bit for us, and we have maybe a few more options. So let's talk about things you can do right away if you don't have a budget, if you don't have very much at all. Now, there's a few things you can do for free, and the goal is going to be get in the studio, get something really professionally recorded. That's always going to be the goal. But I understand that we're not always in that boat, and these are things you can do even if you do have a budget. You should do them anyway. And one of the things you can do is to record yourself live like at home, like do a live performance in your living room with your webcam or your iPhone or a smart device of some kind, and do a live performance. Like if you're a singer-songwriter, do it in your living room, do it in your backyard, do it at the piano, wherever you jam, do it there, and post it on social media. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you and your fans are hanging out, post it there. There's a lot of cool things that can happen. You can get viral action. And by the way, it's okay if it's not like a super high-tech camera, although they are pretty darn accessible to us right now. I mean, I know for sure you know somebody with a camera. So if you can get a camera, definitely do that. But if you don't have access to an HD camera, just use a smartphone. People right now are very forgiving with quality of video and even audio. I mean, audio is more important for the music end of things, but people, generally speaking, are pretty forgiving about, they're used to seeing kind of pixely looking camera phones and stuff like that. So you can get away with a little more when it's apparent that it's coming from just like a smartphone or something. But record yourself is the point. Get a little bit of your magic, your raw talent on film and post it, and you can gain traction, and it's possible it could even go viral. If people are just like amazed and stunned, yes, they will share it just because they like it. So that's one thing you can do for free, and we should probably do it anyways. Like people want to know that we're not just all studio magic, we're not just all effects and auto-tune. They want to know that we're the real deal. So I think it's a smart idea to do this anyways, whether you have a budget or you don't. Now, if you do have a budget, I definitely recommend getting into the studio, or even if you have a very modest budget, you can definitely do even just 3 songs. And usually that is pretty affordable. You can ask for favors. I'm sure you know somebody who has a recording studio or who wouldn't mind playing an instrument for you. You can always barter with people as well. So don't be intimidated by, I don't have a huge budget. You can do things that sound pretty high quality for a pretty low price. Just my experience. But I know this to be true just from the music industry and typically the going rates that are around right now. Now, if you have a bigger budget or you're planning on getting one through crowdfunding, which we'll talk about later, you should now consider your options and consider how much things might start to cost. And yes, it's true that the more you have, the more you're going to spend, but it is also true that you can't often get what you pay for. So, but not always the case. Sometimes we'll have someone very talented who will offer their services for a pretty awesome price. So don't be thrown off by that, but just something to think about. And now we need to figure out, what songs are you going to do? This is sometimes a process of torture, I find, because it's like all these songs you've written are your babies and you're having to eliminate them and narrow them down to the best ones. And we're going to talk about a few processes right now about how you can choose a single, how you can choose 3 songs if you only have a few, if you're only doing a 3-song demo or something, or how to narrow down from an album. So if you have a plethora of songs, like I did when I did my first album, I had to narrow it all down. I had to do a process of elimination, and there are several components we need to consider as to how it's going to sound in the end when we put certain songs with other songs, and the best way to choose them. So here are my best tips for choosing songs. The easiest thing to do is to first consider what genre you want to be, because not all the songs we write are a good reflection of our target niche. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes we'll write a song that is like totally out in left field, and it was really fun and we were experimenting, which is a really good thing to do, but it isn't going to flow very nicely with the majority of the other songs we've written. So for that song, I would say keep it don't ever throw that away, but keep it somewhere else on the side, and you can maybe have another side project. So if it's totally out of left field, people are just going to feel like, what's going on? This makes no sense. Why did they even put that song on this album? So with that said, do whatever you want. And you'll hear me say that. With that said, do whatever you want, because it's your art, but I'm just going to give you my best practices, and I'll just tell you, I don't beat around the bush, you know that by now, and I'll just tell you what I would think if I heard that. So we don't really want to surprise people, like, you know, if we have a rock album and then all of a sudden we throw a country song out of the blue, people are going to be like, what the heck? So we don't really want to do that. So after we have figured out, okay, what genre do I want to be? Then we can kind of tweak the songs a little bit. And maybe you have some songs that, you know, they're in that vein, but you need them to sound a little more like that. Keep that in mind when you're in the studio. And there are things you can do after the fact too, in post-editing, that you could do to really make it sound a little bit more like that. And that would be in the mixing process as well, like certain EQs and certain tones of things will help to even just define your genre a little bit better. But for now, what you need to do is just look at your songs and decide which songs best fit into my target genre or my niche. And then label them as such. We're not going to eliminate anything. We won't eliminate anything just yet, but we just want to start narrowing down that process. Now, we can also circle our favorites. I made a huge list on my first album. I just had so many songs, and I was trying to figure out which songs are going to flow well into one another, which sound like they belong together, which ones sound like a collection, like they, you know, it's like each song is a chapter perhaps. And how would a book flow, you know, from one chapter to another? You're going to want to have peaks and valleys. So, you know, we can circle our favorites, because that's a good idea. I mean, we want to like the songs. We don't want to compromise and go, you know what, I really don't like that song, but it fits well. You know, at the end of the day, we have to live with it. So don't choose songs that you don't love. And then what I want us to do is rate our songs on a scale of 1 to 10 based on their energy levels. There's a guy named Tom Jackson, and he is a professional live performance coach, and he just helps people craft their live performances and even like somewhat their choreography and whatnot. And he is a fantastic guy to listen to, and I love what he said about rating your song energy, because when you're performing live, there's an art and a science to even just psychology and the vibes that you're projecting off the stage based off of your song energy levels and the way you place them in your live set deeply impacts the audience. And so your first song, for example, you wouldn't want it to be a 10, for example. If a 10 would be the highest energy level that we possibly have. It's jumping around on stage, it's a mosh pit, it's like double kicks everywhere, it's really fast, high energy song. And a 1 would be like a really slow ballad, like put you to sleep, maybe there's not even drums in it, you know. So we really want to pick, if it was going to be your first song on stage and this audience is a cold audience, they've never heard of you before, we wouldn't start off with a 10. We would start off with a 5 or a 4 or 5, you know, a high how are you song. A 5 is a meet and greet song. It's in the middle of the road, it's not in your face, it's not boring. We don't want to bore anybody to death. So we want to pick something in the middle of the road that just like a handshake, like, hi, how are you? This is me, this is what I'm all about. Hope you like it. And then from there we can add more energy. But we want people to like us first and foremost. So when it comes to picking our songs, we need to rate them all. Now it's totally cool if you have songs that are 1s and 2s, and you have songs that are 7, 8s, and 9s, and a 10, and then a few 5s. It's totally cool. We just want to rate them all first. We're going to make this all fit after the fact. But I love what he says about that, because it helped me so much on how I chose my songs and in what order I put them. Because listening to a CD is also like a live experience where maybe somebody never heard us before and they're going to experience our music for the very first time, and we want to make a good impression, and we want to take them through peaks and valleys, just like a film or a book. You know, there's like a plot, and it will take you up and it'll take you down, and it'll be climax, and then a big, you know, crash, and then there's like suspense, and then, you know, the big finale ending. And I don't see why CDs are any different than that. To me, it's so similar to like a book or a storyline or a good film. There's emotion. We're telling a story. We are taking them on highs and lows. And so that's how we're going to rate our songs, is based on energy and or mood. And then we can kind of start to strategically place them. So one thing to keep in mind is we wouldn't want a CD of all 2s or all 5s or all 10s. We want to mix it up, because that just makes for a better story. It makes for a better user experience. As markety as that sounds, it's so true. We want to feel it as well. And so when you're considering what songs to narrow down and to put on your 3-song EP or your full-length album, keep energy in mind. We don't want them all the same. We want some at certain levels and some at others, to make for a very dynamic piece and a very dynamic collection. And so from that point, we can start to kind of see the lay of the land now. We've got our list of songs, we've got our favorites marked, we've got the energy levels marked, we've got our niche narrowed down, and from there it's going to start to become a lot more clear to you about which songs are supposed to be on this next project. And I think by now you'll start to go, oh, okay, like I think I got this now, and I think I know which song definitely doesn't belong on here, and I know these 2 songs almost sound similar, so maybe you're keeping them, but you would need to space them apart. You won't want to put 2 similar sounding songs right next to each other. We would space them apart with a bunch of other dynamic songs. And so things like that are going to make you sound so much more professional than the average artist, because you are not average, and I already know that for a fact, because you're sitting here going through this strategic planning process with me. So I hope you feel a little more encouraged about picking the right songs. And if you were just going to release a single, you would go through the same process. You would probably choose your favorite song. You would make sure it is the exact niche and umbrella genre and micro niche that you were wanting to target, and you would rate it by its energy level, and it needs to be kind of a high how are you song. We don't want to yell in anybody's face for the first time they meet us, unless that is really truly your genre. If your genre is like yelling in people's faces and that's what it's all about, then go for it. But for most of us, we probably have some 10s, and we probably have some 1s or 2s, and we probably have more 4 and 5s and 6s. So let's start with one of those. If you had to choose a single, that's a good route to go. It's like dating, you know. It's like you don't want to scare anybody on the first date, and you also don't want them to feel bored. So it's just something in the middle of the road, and you can't go wrong with that. Musicians. Let's talk about musicians for just a second, because depending on your situation, you might have either a band that you're already working with, so that when you go into the writing process and the studio process, you already know who is doing what. And make sure, if that's the case, that it's really solid and kind of in stone about everybody's roles. And if you have one musician who's also doing something else, make sure it's just really clear between you, for the sake of everybody's sanity and like good vibes and like good times in the studio. You don't want to have like expectations that aren't met at the last second, only to find out there was a miscommunication or something like that. This is all totally avoidable if we just know going into it who is playing what. Now, maybe you're a solo artist like me, and I just hire out the musicians that I need or that I want to work with. I have kind of blank spaces about who is going to play what. I know all the instruments that I mostly need, and some other things where I'm not sure who is going to play it yet. And I just know that I might need some help with, orchestration or something like that, and I have no idea who it's going to be to help. So I just kind of have a list of all the, the positions that need to be filled, for lack of a better term. And for me, then I work and I start talking to people that I know, and I look at people's work and who would I like to work with, whose work do I think would suit what I'm doing, and I make sure that I make contact with them and see if they're interested in my project, and then I start filling up the spaces. So that is one thing that you can do if you're a solo artist. You can definitely hire out. Don't feel like, well, I can't record because I don't have a band. No problem. You know what? It's becoming less and less common to have a band that's set in stone, and more popular and just becoming more a normal thing that people just hire session musicians. And the nice thing about hiring session musicians is that you just pay them the fee that they require for the session, and then it's done. There's no like splitting royalties and stuff. So just something to think about for the future. And I've never had any problems. Everybody I'm working with is usually great and fantastic musicians, and because you do the research beforehand, like whose work do I really like, and who is a nice guy, who's a nice person that I hear good things about. Well, I want to work with them. Awesome. And it usually goes awesome, and it's a really fun process. Studio booking fee. So a lot of studios require a deposit in order to book the studio time. So just be prepared for that, and part of that planning is knowing how much time do you actually need in the studio. So the strategy here that I recommend is just book more time than you think you need. I guarantee you will use it up. You will not walk out of the studio saying, oh, I have a whole day left and now I have to pay for it. That's not going to happen. I promise you. You will probably be running out of time thinking, I wish I'd booked more. So what you're going to have to do is try to guess how much time you're going to need, and that somewhat depends on how well rehearsed you are, how well rehearsed your musicians are, your bandmates, and obviously the more rehearsed you are, the better. And make sure, and this is like, all musicians should do this, but it will save you time, is make sure that you rehearse, if you're playing live instruments there, rehearse to a metronome, because you're going to have to play it and play it and play it, and if you're sloppy with your timing, that will really eat into your studio time because the clock is ticking. So when you're at home, just have a metronome on all the time, unless your music doesn't require one and it's just, no timing at all. But most of us have drums, most of us have some kind of rhythm, so we need to play in time and we need to be very good at it. So work on your meter if you can, whether you're singing even or playing piano or guitar or whatever. Work on your meter, and then you will not waste any time in the studio. And one other tip is, if you can't afford much studio time, the one thing that I can tell you to do is do not cheap out on drums. If you can't record anything else in a professional studio, spend the money on recording drums in a very good room. Don't skimp on that. The drums is the absolute foundation of the whole CD and everything you're gonna do. It's the foundation of your music, and if the drums sound like crap, the whole rest of the house that you're building on that foundation isn't gonna be very solid. It's also gonna sound kind of crappy, and you just can't cover that up. The drums, you can't cover it up. So even with good drum editing, and you'll actually spend more money in drum editing than you would have had you just gotten it right the first time and spent money on a really good room and a really good technician, really good engineer, got the right mics and everything going. So that is my big tip for you, and you will save yourself a ton of time and money. Music gear rentals. I like to rent some really high quality, expensive gear just for the studio, because it makes me feel like $1 million for one, but also the sound obviously matters. So make a list of everything that you're going to need, everything you don't have and will need. Renting gear is not very expensive, and if you only need it for like a week or two, it's not going to be a huge cut out of your album budget. So just, if you don't have it or you don't have a friend that you can borrow it from, don't be afraid to just go out and rent it. I rented a really amazing mic and like, you know, a $3,000 microphone that I was like, woo, you know, it's special sounding. It makes you feel spiffy when you sing into it, and all those little things add up to a really professional sound, and plus you feel awesome using that gear, you know, that you wouldn't normally have. So just put that on your worksheet, anything that you need that you don't have that's gonna enhance your recording. Pre-production. If you're just first starting out and this is your first time really getting into recording, pre-production is where we would start laying out our scratch tracks. And scratch tracks are just basically, it's like a demo except a little bit more than a demo. We are really mapping out the whole song in detail because we don't want any surprises. The idea of a scratch track is to know for sure in stone the BPM, the beats per minute, how long the song is, where the structure goes, where's the bridge, where's the chorus, where are the verses, how do the vocals sound, and you're really kind of like building that foundation for the song. And a lot of times people will keep some of the tracks they even used for scratch tracks. So typically you would kind of redo everything over again for real. So it's kind of like the practice track that you're gonna redo and make it for real and more professional sounding. You're gonna do it like way better. But sometimes really magical things happen in the scratch tracks and you end up keeping something. So keep that in mind. But this is also the time during the scratch track pre-production phase where you want to make sure that the vision for the song is still there compared to when you first wrote the song. I don't know about you, but sometimes when I'm in the middle of writing a song and it's really fresh, there's like sometimes like a magic that was there when I first wrote it and I quickly recorded it so I wouldn't forget it, and there's like, I don't know, there's like a really special vibe going on in that song. And sometimes when you get in the studio, it's like not there anymore, and I don't know why, but maybe it's just because it's a lot more produced or something like that. But in the pre-production phase, that's a good place to make sure that you're still kind of on target with your original idea and your original vision for your song. Make sure that they kind of align, and if you're not feeling it, just go back to your original demo or when you first wrote that song and just try to figure out what was it that really made me feel like, oh, like this song is great and I need to record it. There's probably something going on that you could add to, or maybe you need to take away. So oftentimes bands will do the pre-production themselves, or if you've hired a producer, they can do it for you. Make sure you have your lyrics all printed out in pre-production so you can make any changes, scratch things out, make notes on your papers during pre-production. So anything about instruments, the BPM, anything needs to change or be added, any thoughts. Your songs might morph a little bit in the pre-production process. So we want to keep the magic, but we also want to make them better. So don't be afraid of that, and just really communicate with your bandmates and with your producer what you're hearing and what you want from it. This is a time for you to be very vocal in the pre-production phase. Don't feel shy that, you know, other people are going to have ideas and a producer might really have opinions, and now is not the time to kind of let them take over. Like, I mean, they're there to help you and you need to work as a team, but you also need to make sure that your original idea is still there and really present. So that is a very important part of this whole recording phase, is this pre-production phase. Drum editing. Some producers or mixers have a separate fee for editing drums. I've talked to many people and apparently it's the most tedious, horrible job in the world, and it takes forever to do, but obviously it's worth it. We want really crisp, clean songs. We don't want anything sloppy, and no offense if you're a drummer, but they just can't play it perfect 100% of the time. They can be really amazing, but it's not perfect. And so I do recommend getting drum editing done. It's a very good idea. And so whether it's just a little bit of a sloppy fill here and there, don't cut corners on the drum editing, and that is definitely something you want to keep in your budget. Vocal production. If this is already part of your studio time, then just include this in your costs. If you're like me, I'm a vocalist and I had to book studio time separately for my vocals because I recorded a lot of my pianos and synths at home. So I just needed a really professional sounding booth with professional sounding gear. I needed a good engineer and I needed a producer there who could help bring the best out of my vocals. So that was a separate thing for me. So if you're a singer-songwriter, make sure you include that in your cost. And it's really great if you can have a producer that is working with you, because there are times where we really need to be coached a little bit. The guy I hired was fantastic. He happened to be a vocalist himself, and so he was able to help me find harmonies when I got stuck. He was able to encourage me when I started to get discouraged and feeling like, oh, I really suck today. You know, he would just tell me, it's all good, let's have lunch, just take a break, drink some water, have some tea, we'll come back, it's all good. And sure enough, everything was fine. And instead of getting discouraged, he was really helpful. And so I hope you can find somebody like that to work with that will really cheer you on and help bring out the best in your vocals. A producer. Well, this is kind of a big deal because a producer is a very large cost most of the time. Now, it depends on what kind of artist or band that you are. A producer could be an amazing thing for you, or it could be a hindrance and a source of stress or contention. So the role of a producer is really supposed to be somebody who can take your talent and really bring it to the next level and make it more marketable and make it a little bit better. Just, you know, it's like they're supposed to bring the spit and polish, help give you a little more direction, define your sound a little more, and just be able to bring it to the market. And so it can be amazing for a lot of people. And there's even a lot of very well-established bands and artists that you hear every single day, and they are always working with producers. So it's not like the better you get, the less of a chance you're going to need a producer. Not always the case. However, there are artists who really know their sound. They know what they're going for, they understand their goal, they understand their market, and therefore they don't feel they need a producer. And touche, you probably don't if that's you. I've done both ways, and they're both different experiences. So there's not really a right or wrong here. It's more of a cost factor and a goal factor. Like, what are your goals? Do you feel like, I know I'm a diamond in the rough and I wish somebody could just listen to my stuff and then just help me polish that diamond and then take it to the next level? If so, a producer could really help you, and I think you would really greatly benefit from it, and the money would probably be very much worth it. If, on the other hand, you are really opinionated about how you feel about your music and your songs, and you're really touchy about it, you don't want anyone to change anything about it because you love it just the way it is, and you understand your niche, you understand your market, then don't get a producer. I think that would cause a lot of tension and stress, and you might end up even parting ways. So no need to really go there. So it just depends on your situation, where you're at, where your music is at, how well developed of an artist and musician are you, and do you need that extra help, or are you all good on your own? So these are just things to consider, and there's no right or wrong on this one. So consider the cost, consider where you're at, and make sure you're writing this down. As far as choosing a producer, well, there's a couple ways to go about this. You can just ask your friends, you know, other musicians that you know, who did they get, and go and listen to some of their stuff and figure out if that's maybe who you'd want to get. Maybe hire somebody you know that's going to give you a good deal. Or you can do what I did and compose a list of bands whose sound that I really loved, and then I looked up who produced them. And then I contacted them, and I was able to get squeezed in. And it was, you know, on my last couple albums, it was somebody who was very well known in my genre, which is golden. If you can hire a producer who's well known for producing bigger, more famous bands in your genre, that makes you look awesome. And producers are, they're like other musicians. They're always running out of work because, their projects are kind of short term. They can range from anywhere from a few days to maybe a few months. And then they run out of work and they need more work. So most likely, if you contact them and you can work out some kind of budget with them, they're gonna work with you. And if it's somebody in your genre, in your niche, this is a great opportunity to really get some credibility and say, so-and-so is producing my album, and they also produce these other bigger, more famous bands. It's a pretty easy way to just get a little bit more notoriety and a little bit of attention in the media. So definitely use that to your advantage. Make a list of your favorite bands, go to the websites, contact those producers, and see who replies. Photography. You must have good photos. No taking photos of yourself on your iPhone, no selfies, no cheap cameras. You need some good photos. Everybody knows 12 photographers. They're like hairdressers. There's one around every corner. So no excuses here. You're gonna need to hire a photographer. You need to do a photo shoot. And if your band is really not into photos, I mean, you at least need one or a few, at least for your website. If your album cover art is an illustration or an art design of some kind and isn't a photo, I still think you should have a photo of you somewhere, in your CD jacket or on social media. You need photos somewhere. So get it done and make sure you put that in your budget and it's part of your cost of your overall project.